Thanks. And some of you may have seen this earlier today. We made an announcement that Annika and I are going to be co-chairing a collective group that will be called the Women's League Forum. For many of you who are perhaps less connected to the international landscape, a lot of the men's professional leagues work together through a group called the World Leagues Forum. And we have been convening over the last 15 months in an informal way to share best practices and ideas with all of the professional leagues that have women playing professionally soccer globally. And we have enjoyed that convening so much that we've made the decision to formalize our group, and we are excited to be co-chairing this initiative together. This is the first time that this group is convening around a professional club league tournament. Historically, we have met around national team competitions. We met at the Women's Euros last year, and we met at the Women's World Cup this summer in Sydney. And we are proud to be hosting 11 of the top professional women's soccer leagues in the world here in San Diego. Those leaders have been meeting over the last 2 days to share ideas and best practices and identify ways that we could work in the collective to advocate and share best practices around how we can advance the global game and the professionalization of the club game, knowing that we are the daily training environment for these players and that we are a really important component of the global ecosystem. I'll turn it over to Annika to share a few words, and we are, of course, also happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jessica. It's really inspirational to be here. And as Jessica said, that we start the Women's League Forum today. And it's a historical day because for almost every part in football you have an organization. For the players you have the FIFA Pro, for the association you have FIFA, and early on you have for the men's league, professional men's league, you have the World League Forum, and from today we have also the Women's League Forum. So it's really a historical day, and I think it's going to be great to share together with Jessica. And I'm really excited to work with the development of the Women's League.
So the last point I'll make is that this collaboration was very intentional. Obviously, we're very proud of our achievements and accomplishments here in the US and all of our growth commercially on behalf of the sport of women's soccer. And Annika, on behalf of the professional Swedish league, brings the know-how of understanding the European landscape and all of her incredible relationships at FIFA and UEFA and her decades of experience in the global football world. And together, we really think that we can advance women's football globally.
We'll take a few questions for both of them up here, if anyone, either on the Zoom or in the room. We'll go to Jackie in the back.
Hi, Jessica. Jackie here with Women Kickballs. Just speaking of the growth of the NWSL, obviously you have these new expansion teams, the new media rights deal and things like that. But just wanted to get your thoughts of what's the league's responsibility when it comes to just how it's going to level up the standard of media for the people in this room to make sure that we have just the basic and necessities needed for our coverage as well.
So happy to answer your question, and hi Jackie. And I'll just ask that once we're done with this portion of the press conference, we'll let Annika catch her flight back to Europe, I think, and we can turn to some of the state of the league. But just to answer your question, we, in this past year, advanced and evolved our media access policy with our clubs, and that's something that Kirsten and Mark work closely with our teams on. We recognize and know that it's really important if we want coverage from all of you that you need to have access to the game, to the coaches, to the players. It's something that we are open to and take feedback on from all of you and appreciate all your support. We do recognize that it's important. We also navigate through the landscape of the collective bargaining agreement, which sets some parameters around which we have to respect players' off time. And so navigating that balance is always our challenge, and we always look to ensure that we're providing that access.
Before we continue with more of those State of the League questions, are any questions on the announcement on the Women's League Forum? Steph, in the front.
Thanks. Commissioner Berman, you just mentioned having to respect the CBA. Obviously, different countries will have different rules around labor rights and the interaction of players with their leagues. I'm just wondering, was there also discussion between each of the leagues and whatever player representation group might exist in those countries in bringing in input into this group, or is that something that you plan on in the future? Again, acknowledging that there are difference in U.S. laws, EU laws, that sort of thing.
I'll start and then would love your opinion as well. In fact, we invited FIFPro to attend a portion of our meetings yesterday and today. Sarah Gregorius unfortunately wasn't able to attend, but Becca Rue and Megan Burke sat in on some portion of the meetings that related to some of the areas that we think there are opportunities for us to collaborate. We also have working groups that have been established over the last 15 months, one around safeguarding, one around player compensation and training compensation, so that we can focus collectively on how we can incentivize clubs to invest in the next generation of talent in collaboration with the federation. So there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration among the leagues as it relates to player benefits, compensation, and also safeguarding.
I have nothing to say because I thought your answer was really good, so.
Thank you.
I'll go to Jonathan Tannewell on Zoom.
Thanks, Kirsten. Hi, Commissioner. Jonathan Tannewell from the Philadelphia Inquirer here. One about this World Leagues Forum is, as somebody who's watched what Don Garber has done on the other side of the ledger a bit with this. If one of these leaders of these other leagues comes over to you and says, so why exactly do you play in the summer? What do you think you're going to tell them?
Well, one of the things we've learned actually is that we're not the only league who has a different season. So we've done a lot of work, actually. The bulk of our time has been on the schedule. And we've learned that a lot of the Nordic countries, for example, have a similar schedule to us. We've learned that the Mexican League has a two-part season where they have a unique structure. And one of the things that we think can help us as we build for the future is understanding best practices globally. There are other countries that have similar challenges in terms of weather that we're trying to understand and learn from. And also for the countries that actually play through the winter months, what are the technologies that they deploy to ensure that their fields are appropriate and aren't frozen and covered in snow? How do they train? What are their access to the facilities that are necessary to ensure that our athletes are getting the appropriate training environment? And so those are all some really good examples, and so I appreciate the question where we can actually learn from others about the ways that we can build for the future, and happy to hear from you.
Yeah, because we have the same challenges, at least trying to play football as we play from spring to autumn, and that's quite different from the rest of Europe, but also different to other leagues. And we can see the problem with the international calendar, how we can adjust that so it fits for all the leagues globally, and that's one of the issues that we're going to discuss with FIFA and see that we got to change so it's been possible to develop the leagues both professionally and commercially.
We'll go here in the room. Behind, sorry, Meg.
Hello. Okay. Abraham Zabella here. So there's a playoff game happening just down the border in Tijuana for the Liga MX Femenil. Could you speak a little bit more on just what the conversations have been with the Liga MX Femenil and the partnership that they're going to have as part of this forum?
Yeah, so Liga MX Femenil have been at the table with us through the Women's League Forum from the beginning. They're, as you know, very committed to the women's game and have shown incredible success on and off the pitch, and in particular growth. And so I expect them to be a very active contributor. They've attended all of our meetings in person that we've had and are very interested in collaborating and sharing ideas and learning how we can grow the ecosystem.
And they're also part of the board. And as you say, it's been an amazing journey for the Mexican League, because when you sit at the state that the FIFA ranking does, Mexican League is in the top of almost everything when it comes to spectators, revenue, whatever. It's a really good example.
We'll go here to Meg.
Are there plans or a way for other leagues to potentially join this? Like, how are you looking to expand it? Are you actively seeking out new members for this?
And hopefully other leagues will join us. If you can see on the men's side, when they started off the World League Forum, I thought there were 26 at the start, and now there are almost 50 leagues. So I presume that we're going to go the same way and expand.
Hi, thanks. Sarah from the Women's Soccer Show. You mentioned that you're in touch with FIFA. I'm curious, I think a lot of us talk about the landscape of women's soccer and how, as it grows, it should grow on its own and not be built in the same structure as men's soccer. Is this kind of the first step that you see in the international scope of women's soccer to take that step to kind of build the infrastructure for women's soccer and how that needs to be?
Why don't you start?
You can start,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, one of the things that we've really enjoyed is working with the World League Forum infrastructure, because we've been able to analyze the ways in which they operate on the World Leagues Forum side and intentionally decide what makes sense for us and what doesn't. One of the things we've done that there is best practice around from the men's leagues is a benchmarking report that allows for us to identify what are the metrics that we look at, each of us, at our independent leagues, and pull all that together so that we can identify places where others might be excelling and we can share ideas. There might be other areas where we say we want to do something different, and we have the latitude now that we've formalized our structure and officially agreed to this declaration of principles that has us all committed to working for the collective to grow the game.
We'll go to the back.
Hi, Peyton Skeels, She Plays Inc. For leagues that aren't fully professional at this time or are completely amateur but looking kind of for that help and pathway to becoming fully professional, whether that be a lack of resources that's keeping them behind or just not having the infrastructure and kind of people to help organize, that is required for a league of these scales that you guys are a part of, is this forum going to have vehicles or a means of providing assistance or advising to those more developing groups?
Should I ask? I think so, because my experience from women's football is that you share experience, you share the knowledge, and you're always trying to help others to develop. And I think that's going to be yes.
Yeah, I think we have aspirations to do that, absolutely. One of the ways that we could do it in the short term is to invite stakeholders to the table who are in a position to influence the development of those leagues, like the confederations and the federations. And for better or worse, one of the things that we talk about all the time as part of this collective is that each of our leagues are organized in different ways. So in fact, some of the stakeholders who are at the table are actually federations, and so they are the ones who actually deploy those resources to build those leagues and are therefore in a position to help those leagues to flourish. And so by definition, we'll be in a position to be sharing best practices with those who are trying to launch those leagues and have them ultimately become independent.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank you so
questions,
much.
and we'll continue on. Thank you. Just slide over to the center.
Okay. Okay.
All right. I am going to turn it back over to Commissioner Berman for some opening remarks.
Thanks, everyone, and appreciate the segue to have an opportunity to look holistically at this global ecosystem. I think you'll pick up a consistent theme. From a year ago, I talked about the way that I was focused really domestically and in the NWSL because there was a lot of work to do. And over the last year, we've taken intentional effort to look internationally and recognize that we do compete for international talent globally, and there are opportunities for us to learn from others, and this is a really important forum for us to do that. Turning to the NWSL and why we're all here today, and particularly excited to see so many people in person and who are going to be here to enjoy all the festivities today and tomorrow. This week has been a historic moment for the NWSL. We have had another record-breaking year, and many of you were there yesterday when we announced our incredible milestone media deal, where we, I think, achieved more than anyone could have hoped we would. In particular, I would say the thing that made me most excited sitting on the dais yesterday with CBS, ESPN, Amazon, and Scripps was to hear the ways in which they are fully committed to cross-promoting our games and ensuring that our current fans and our future fans know how to find us. And knowing that we are going to be on multiple platforms, that was always a fundamental tenet for us in operationalizing and agreeing to these deals. As we think about reflecting on this past season, I want to share a couple of newsworthy items about our statistics and our achievements. When we look at attendance, as we know, last year our attendance was up 50%. This year, for this regular season, our median attendance for our regular season is up 40%, average attendance up 26%. And in the regular season alone, we have sold more than 1.2 million tickets. That's a 36% increase from last year. And we know that attendance is the rocket fuel that drives all of the growth of everything else that we're building and creates the excitement around our game that makes people not only want to attend games, but to consume our content and to watch our games on TV. I think another really important achievement in the 2023 season is really thinking about the ways in which we scaled the success stories from 2022. We talked a lot last year about our expansion teams, and in particular, Angel City and San Diego's success off the pitch in their attendance and their commercial growth. We have scaled that to so many of our clubs, and 9 of our teams drew more than 10,000 fans to a game. And importantly, we've doubled the number of games that we had more than 10,000 fans attending. And this is really the proof point that these are not isolated moments of success. We have a moment in time where we can absolutely have that inflection point, that across the league we have proven that people want to watch women's soccer and they're willing to pay to come, and that we are worth our value. As we look at our broadcast and our viewership, our 2023 season was our most successful year we've ever had. Our total CBS viewership was up 41% year over year, and we saw an 83% increase on Paramount Plus through streaming. Some other areas I'd like to talk about relate to expansion. So we all know that next season we have 2 new teams joining the league. We couldn't be more excited to welcome back the Utah Royals, and Bay FC are going to be part of our league for next year, teams 13 and 14, and both are pacing ahead of any metrics from prior expansion in terms of engagement with their potential season ticket holders and all of their community engagement efforts, and are very much positioned for success. We've obviously had changes in ownership in Chicago, and we were proud to welcome Laura Ricketts and the Ricketts family with the Chicago Red Stars, and they have been hard at work figuring out all of the ways in which they are going to improve all of the different aspects of their business, both on and off the pitch. And I am proud to share, and I know this has been a consistent question as we think about expansion, that we are officially launching our expansion process. We will start, following the championship, our Team 16 expansion process. As a reminder, we have already made the decision as a league and through our board to admit Team 15, which will be in Boston, and that is also an incredible ownership group led by Jennifer Epstein, Stephanie Connaughton, Amy Danoff, and Anna Palmer. And beginning following championship, we will be again working with Inner Circle to find Team 16. And our preliminary analysis of the landscape is that we have more than a dozen qualified investor groups from different markets around the US who are extremely interested in the kinds of investment that we know is required in order to operationalize a successful team. As we think about the soccer side of our business, it's no surprise to anyone, we remain the most competitive league in the world. Week in, week out, every game matters. We saw that up until the last day of our regular season, decision day which was October 15, the last week of our regular season. Every single game that was played mattered. It mattered for making the playoffs, it mattered for standings, and it created an environment that had our players excited to compete, and it had our fans engaged in every moment of the action. As we look ahead to 2024 and beyond, we are at an inflection point. We have our new media deals. You heard us talk about how this is the beginning of our future, and we know that this is a moment not to be complacent. It's a moment to invest for the future. It's a moment that we don't take for granted. We believe we have an unprecedented opportunity to grow this league and to build for the future, and that is what we are prepared to do. Our aspiration is to be the best league in the world, and we're prepared to make the decisions and investments that are necessary for us to make that a reality. With that, I'll take any questions anyone has.
Go in the back.
Hi, Commissioner. Chris Smith with Sports Business Journal. Thank you for the time. I feel like much of the narrative around the league and perhaps the strategy of the league the last few years has been about taking a leadership position within women's sports. On the heels of some of the big milestones this year, some of the ones you referenced before, new expansion, new investors, new media deal, I was curious if you could share your perspectives on where the league now stands in that broader professional sports landscape, and whether you think that narrative or that strategy for the league needs to change a little bit and maybe set the bar higher.
Yeah, I think we're really proud of the leadership position that we've taken globally. We think that we have a lot of know-how and subject matter expertise in terms of setting the standard for commercial growth, and there are areas that we think there's an opportunity for us to listen and learn. And one of the areas that we're really focused on for the future is the soccer side of the business, how we can listen and learn from other countries in terms of development and the player pipeline, how we can ensure that we're attracting and recruiting the best talent in the world. These are things that are, frankly, good problems to have. It's because there is a global talent pool that historically did not exist, and it is because of the standards that our country has set historically, and now it's time for us to move the goalposts and ensure that we're resourced and prepared to compete.
We'll go right here.
Hi, Leo Bodwin from the Rose City Review. Just wondering if you have any update on Portland ownership in terms of timeline and whatnot.
So I'll probably get a question about the rain as well, so maybe I'll answer them that preemptively and answer your question. Both of those clubs are in active sales processes and are making significant progress. The timeline that I shared back at the Challenge Cup final continues to be what we expect, which is that we will expect to sell both of those teams or have those teams be owned by new investors by the end of the calendar year.
We'll go over here to Steve.
Commissioner Steve Goff from the Washington Post. Two parts. One, this year you had to work around a World Cup. Next year you have Olympics. Do you see a similar calendar with 2 additional teams and more games now? How you see that, think that'll work? And second part, you'll have a little competition domestically with another league. How the league and the owners view that competition from USL?
To your first question, we have made a decision as a league and as a board that we will not have regular season games during the Olympic window. And so as part of these calendar conversations, we will respect the FIFA window to ensure that our players are able to compete in our league when they're not competing internationally. We likely will have some league activity during that period, and a lot of that remains a work in progress, and so more to come on that. And I guess that means, in short, we will have, as a general matter, a consistent schedule footprint. We're still going to be announcing, or to be announced, what exactly those dates are. As it relates to the USL and the potential of them starting next year, we are also interested in learning what their plans are and have no information to share on that. Certainly, there are a lot of opportunities for growth and for investment in soccer, in particular women's soccer, and we've seen that through our expansion process. So we're focused on building our league and focusing on making the investment decisions that are best for our league.
We'll go up here to Jeff.
Jeff Kasufi, ESPN. We heard a lot about development. I think that word's been used a lot. It was used this morning. Tatiana spoke a little bit on a panel at the DEI about pipelines. I'm wondering if you have a timeline, if things are even advanced enough to have a timeline on something like a formalized or centralized youth academy or youth setup pipeline that the league would support, and if not, if there are other channels for that, like maybe a reserve league or second teams formalized for these NWSL teams?
Thanks for the question. It's definitely one of the areas that are most challenging for us, in particular because there are so many different players in the ecosystem who already occupy the space. So what we've been doing at the league is doing a landscape analysis in all of our markets to understand who are the players in those spaces, what are our clubs already doing, what are they interested in doing. As importantly, what is U.S. Soccer planning to do as they continue to feed the pipeline for development, and that's something we're working on collaboratively with them. We know that this is such an important moment in time in our country for player development. We want to ensure that the investments we make are additive and not redundant or conflicting with those who are making investment prospectively for the future. So the short answer is it's still a work in progress. We expect to be doing more in the space as soon as next year, and more to come on exactly what our plans are.
We'll go to Zoom for a couple. Jonathan Tannenwald.
Thanks, Kirsten. Hi again. Commissioner, it is shockingly an expansion question. Does the USL Super League, in fact, it plays again off the Super League and how they relate into expansion. And if they go into a market first that you might want to be in or where you have a bid, they've already made a move on Philadelphia, and we don't know yet what's potentially in the works for a Philadelphia NWSL bid. There's chatter in Denver that something that's getting organized there could go into either league. How much is that going to factor in to how you look at the overall landscape? And I want to ask something a little more specific based on what Steve Goff said about the Super League. They're planning to go into the Washington area at launch, whenever launch is. They're planning to go into the Bay Area at some point not too long after that, where you're already going to have existing teams. How on that specific level of markets with both teams is that going to play out? Thanks.
I think we're approaching this the way you'd expect smart business people to approach this, which is that we're focused on our priorities and the things that are most important to our business. Those include minimum standards and ensuring that the stadiums where we play are built for the future. We are already at 10,000 capacity average, more than 10,000 capacity average in terms of our paid attendance, and so we're going to want to be in bigger stadiums. All of our plans are really to elevate the minimum standards of investment that are required, and so those are the parameters under which we're thinking about all of our expansion efforts and all of the ways in which we think about entering local markets, and you'd have to ask the USL about their plans and their strategy.
Thanks. We'll go Nancy Armour.
Hi, thanks for doing this. You'd mentioned taking some of the lessons that you've learned from some of the expansion teams and other teams that are having great success and trying to scale it with your other clubs. What in particular are you going to do with some clubs that are kind of stubbornly not reaching the level of some of the other ones, or not seeing as quick of growth, especially as you have some of these other expansion teams coming in that will obviously draw some attention, marketing dollars, et cetera, from some of the existing clubs?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's something we think a lot about. I say this with the utmost respect for our expansion teams and their incredible achievements. It is also true that it is very hard to incrementally increase in the ways in which the expectations that have been set by our expansion teams on a year-over-year basis. And so if you look at all of our clubs putting aside our expansion teams, there isn't a single team that isn't up in attendance metrics and isn't a single team that isn't up in commercial growth as it relates to sponsorship. And so we track that on a year-over-year basis. Some of the things we're thinking about are the ways we can better resource the league to share best practices so that those clubs can be in a position to easily deploy measured success that have happened in other markets. And so we're going to continue to do that. The things we're doing are working already. We see that with some of the metrics I shared earlier with 9 of our teams breaking records this past season. So we're going to continue to do the things that we know are working, and we expect to see incremental progress in all of our markets.
We'll go Pardeep Khatri.
Hi, and please excuse the, my sincerest apologies for this noise, but just going off the attendance numbers really quickly, it speaks to the success of the expansion teams as much as it does for a lot of the older teams. Can you just speak to why you think the NWSL is becoming such, something that people are really latching on to?
Yeah, I would attribute it to a few things. I think the number one thing is the fact that our league is investing for the right reasons. We are, I think, and we've learned this through the Women's League Forum, as well as looking at other comparable women's leagues, both domestically and globally. We are one of the few leagues that is fully independent. That means that we make investment decisions and business decisions for our own specific objectives. And that is a very different value proposition to brands, to media partners, and to fans. And for those reasons, we've been able to have a level of authenticity in the story that we're sharing to other businesses that have allowed for, we believe, incremental investment and incremental impact. The second is that our players are cultural icons. If you look at the composition of the players in our league, they are people who are not just relevant on the pitch because they are athletes, but because they stand for so much more than that. And that cultural relevance makes them superstars. And it's one of the reasons that we actually look to the NBA as one of our comps, because the NBA embodies superstars that the NBA has built on the backs of those superstars. And so we lift up the stars that are in our league, and we believe that that has really driven a lot of the success of our league. And the final point I'd make that, in my estimation, has led to our success is the competitiveness of our league. There is no league in the world, certainly soccer, but even I would put us up against any other league that has a more competitive product on the field or on the pitch. And because of that, it creates a compelling way to engage our fans. Every single game matters, and our players are competing to win no matter where we are in the season. And because of that, it's allowed for us to, I think, have the kind of impact that you're describing.
Go ahead, Steph.
Hi, Commissioner. I actually wanted to follow up on Jackie's question earlier about adapting to kind of the new world we're in. I don't know if you saw, there's an article in the Washington Post about the WNBA's own relationship to media and how it's developing. We constantly hear the stats. I think it's like 5% now of all sports media is devoted to women's sports coverage. But the reality is that, not to bag on my own profession, but sports journalism really lags behind in coming up to speed with covering women's sports. I think there's not a single person in this room who hasn't paid out of pocket to cover this sport at some point or another. The vast majority of the people who cover women's soccer in the United States are often either freelancers or they're doing it for free. That's kind of just the state of where we are. And I'm just wondering what level of awareness that there is in the league about this reality. And I know you often talk about one of the values of NWSL is you're agile, you're quick, you can pivot, you can make decisions for yourselves like that. And about, also focusing that energy and having agile strategies in helping media who want to cover you but may not have the same access to resources that men's sports coverage has at the moment.
Yeah, well, I saw a recent report, and I don't know if this is what you are referencing, Steph, that actually women's coverage is now at 15%. Not that that requires a victory lap, but it's a significant difference from when I took my job, where I believe it was at 4%. And so we've gone from 4 to 15 in 18 months, and that's an incredible transformation in terms of the amount of coverage. And I think the success that we're having and some of the other leagues are having, the WNBA, the LPGA, will continue to feed that investment, because we know that businesses want relevant content, and that is driving investment in women's leagues. We see all of those successes that are happening in colleges and the way that female athletes are driving NIL, which will also feed media coverage. I also think that just to go back to our media deal, having mainstream media partners multiple partners who are invested in storytelling will allow for, hopefully, those third-party media companies and individual contributors to have opportunities to be able to interface with our league and to be supported in their efforts to cover our league.
Just go right, or yep.
All right. Hello. I have two for you. I was wondering if you spoke a lot about the expansion team in San Diego in particular. Could you give more detail on what has made the San Diego Wave so successful? And then also, just last week we saw the issue with the field here at Snapdragon Stadium, and next year in 2025 that issue is probably only going to get worse come this time with the MLS team coming in. Can you speak to what it's going to be like for one of these NWSL teams to have to share a stadium with other teams?
Yeah, I'll take your second question first. I guess important moment to celebrate Kansas City, and probably could have and should have been in my opening remarks and what we're thinking about and excited about for next season. Chris and Angie Long are building the first ever in the world dedicated stadium to women's soccer. And I don't think there's a more important investment that is being made anywhere for the future of our game. That is going to be a proof of concept and a case study for us to be able to share with all of our investors, to be able to say, when you control your venue, you control your revenue streams and you control your schedule. And they are going to be in a position to be able to do that. And we think that that's going to light a fire under everybody to say, let's look at this and see whether there are ways that we could do what they're doing. As it relates to the short-term challenge of us being a tenant, it absolutely continues to be a challenge, and we work collaboratively, not just with the venues, but with our partners with whom we share the space. And here at Snapdragon, yes, there will be an MLS team here, and it would, of course, be our interest and the San Diego Wave's interest to make sure that we're positioned to be able to work in partnership to ensure that our team gets the opportunity to play at times that are good for our business as well. As it relates to your first question, in terms of what has made them successful, I think one of the things that we've looked at and we've tried to share as a best practice across the league is the way the San Diego Wave has engaged the local soccer community. It's very clear the game that they had initially broke the record, 32,000. They engaged youth girls soccer teams all across the area, and this is a hotbed for girls soccer, and that exists, maybe not to the same scale, but it certainly exists in many of our markets, and they've developed community partnerships that has engaged those young families to be excited about the Wave, and that is for sure one of the fundamental tenets of their success and one of the ways that many of our clubs are reaching out in their communities to drive their attendance.
Right here, yep. Then Meg.
Hi, Commissioner Tamara Griffin, one of the hustling freelancers Steph mentioned. I had a question about the prejudicial statements and public criticism section of the operations manual, and was wondering if you could just clarify the way the league distinguishes between the importance of creating space for players, coaches, other individuals within this ecosystem to express themselves and publicize their grievances, which I imagine will only become more frequent as players become more empowered in this league, and the importance of making sure that individuals are protected from harmful language.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think something that many organizations have to navigate, as challenging as it is. We always try to go back to our values, and our league stands for inclusion, tolerance, and acceptance. And running a situation through those filters, we hope that we get to what is the right answer. Sometimes those right answers fall in the gray, and we have to look at those situations on a case-by-case basis. But everything that we do is built around our core values, which are inclusion, tolerance, and acceptance. And we believe that that drives and unifies all the players in our league, and hopefully will provide the alignment and unity that has us have a clear approach depending on what the situation is.
Okay, Meg, I promise we're going to get it to you. You go ahead.
Johnny Richardson with Everything San Diego. I'd just like to know a little bit about the four quarterfinals that will be starting next year. What will an 18 playoff look like?
Yeah, well, we haven't yet finalized or announced our specific schedule footprint, but absolutely we are adding quarterfinals, and that will mean that there's no bye week. And so there will be 8 teams that make the playoffs, and those teams will compete in the quarterfinals, go on to the semis, and then into the finals.
Hi. Tamara's question is actually maybe a good lead-in for this, because I wanted to ask you, knowing full well that a team, any team really, the league only has kind of a limited ability to control its stadium policies, but there is maybe an overall guidance of what the league might consider acceptable or unacceptable in terms of fan behavior. But earlier this season, Angel City, and I want to make sure that I'm representing what they said correctly, said only representation relating to the 2 teams competing in today's match will be allowed inside BMO Stadium. And just in terms of being able to balance that tolerance and respect and inclusion for everyone, how do we start to think about more challenging situations where teams might not want certain flags in a stadium, but knowing that fans are very much going to want those flags inside the stadium?
Yeah, I think, again, we'll in that situation or anything analogous in the future, the league will always set our minimum policies, and then our teams have the ability to customize what makes the most sense in their local markets. And that's certainly was in the purview and prerogative of Angel City or any of our other clubs who understand and know their community of fans better than we do at the league office. Our policies and our guidance to the clubs will be driven by the values I shared earlier. And certainly, as Tamara mentioned earlier, there will continue to be challenging situations and circumstances that we have to analyze. And one of the things that we'll be doing this off-season is looking at a whole slate of how other leagues and clubs have handled these things, and really trying to think proactively about what are the best ways for us to guide our clubs so that we can ensure we're living by our values.
We're going to go up front to our MasterCard Junior reporter.
I play professional soccer, and I hope to play professionally. What is something that would be cool is having an academy for each NWSL team for girls my age. Is there something the league has thought about?
Yes, we have, and we wish it were something that we could snap our fingers and make happen for you and other girls your age who we know would be excited and inspired to play at NWSL team academies. Some of the things that we're looking at are what are the things that already exist in local markets that are similar to those academies, because we don't want to compete with local clubs. We want to think about how we do it strategically and make the right investments. And so we do hope that as soon as next year, we'll be doing something proactive in this space on a league-wide basis, and we'll continue to find ways to engage youth, both from a playing perspective and then also to ensure that they have something to look forward to and look up to in our league with our players.
Dan, before I go, Henry Bushnell on Zoom.
Thanks, Kirsten, and thanks, Jessica, for your time. Just going back to the topic of thinking internationally and thinking about you guys in an international scope, I know FIFA has been talking about organizing a Club World Cup on the women's side for a long time, and they haven't actually done it. Has there been any progress on that front? And if not, is it something that you and some of the other top leagues that you're now working with have thought about creating, separate from FIFA?
So, we've certainly been advised that this is something that FIFA is thinking about. We've had conversations with CONCACAF and the Federation about when this might become a reality. Until we get direction, we just don't know. And in turn, we're thinking about the ways that we can build out the possibility of international club competitions on a friendly basis and do games of consequences through tournaments that will allow for our players, as importantly, players to be tested with different styles of play and provide compelling games for our fans to watch.
We'll go Dan.
Dan Loletta from Equalizer. With the announcement of the Friday game on Amazon and the Saturday doubleheader combined with the issue of venue control, are you confident that there is a schedule map to be had that will allow you to have Friday and Saturday games every week without interruption and also without duplicating the same teams often?
Yes, that is something we're committed to with our media partners, and certainly with these deals being approved by our board, everyone understands the expectations. It's certainly going to be a challenge to create a schedule with our venue constraints, but we are confident we'll be able to deliver a schedule that allows for that to be true.
We'll go to Zoom for Alex Ozzie.
Hi, thank you for taking the time again. Alex Ozzie with The Messenger. Following up actually on Tamara's question, in terms of the situations where players and coaches are getting fined because of something that they say in a press conference or social media, can you, I guess, first clarify, like, who is making that determination about whether that fine is handed out? And is there ever any hesitation when they're calling out a safety issue that if they see it in their eyes that way?
Yeah, the group or individual making that decision would be ultimately me or my designee. And so our operations team monitors that, and without overgeneralizing, many of those situations relate to the criticism of officials. And the reason that's important, and I actually appreciate you asking the question, is if we want for qualified officials to want to work in our game, we have to provide an environment that is conducive for them as well. And so it is our responsibility to protect them, understanding that it's frustrating for players as it is frustrating for us when there are mistakes that are made. Those are also humans, as are our players. They are people who deserve to be protected and respected, and they work for the league. We need to ensure that they know that we will have their back when there's public criticism, because their jobs are hard, and we want to create an environment that has more people who are qualified wanting to officiate in our game. That being said, to the extent our coaches, general managers, or players have concerns about our officiating policies, our rules, a particular official, I have given my cell phone number to every single player in the league. I've given my cell phone number to every head coach and every general manager, and we, for the ones who take us up on it, have calls on a ad hoc basis after a game. If people have questions about a call, want to learn, want to share feedback, we are completely open to becoming better. We know we're not perfect, and that is how we have navigated it and struck the balance between the two.
Thanks, Commissioner. We'll take a couple more in the back.
With the new media deals in place, do you have a projection on if or when the players will enjoy revenue sharing during the current CBA?
So in our current CBA, there actually is a provision already that allows for the players to share 10% of net broadcast revenue. And so we have to look at the league holistically in terms of whether we are in a position to do that. That already exists in our deal. And we'll continue to work with the Player Association on the ways to ensure that our players continue to earn an incrementally greater amount year over year. Every year that certainly I've been here, and even prior, the players have continued to earn additional compensation, and we have every expectation that will continue, including next year.
Thanks. I have a question from Tom at the San Diego Union Tribune, whose Zoom is not cooperating with him. The two-part question is, what went into the decision to make the NWSL Championship match in San Diego? And realistically, how long will it be before it returns? Is there some type of rotation system?
Well, and this won't be a surprise to anyone because I have said many times, no matter the topic, I think process gets us to the best possible result. We sent an RFP to all of our clubs and asked for bids to ensure that we were bringing the championship, which we view as a premier league asset, league event, to the right market. We had multiple bidders who sent in their proposal for hosting the championship, and we made the decision that San Diego was the best home for a variety of reasons. Certainly this venue, this stadium, the market's ability to actually show up and buy tickets. I guess that would be a good moment for me to plug for everybody, in particular you and local media. There are still tickets for sale. We would love to sell more tickets and show how strong this fan base is, which we know is the case from the way that the Wave are able to fill this building. And in terms of the future, there's a long list of clubs who are excited to host and share our vision that this is a premier asset. And so I imagine we'll be making our rounds around the league for the foreseeable future.
Nancy Armour, you have another one?
I do. It just led me to wonder, could you see a day that the NWSL goes to, number one seed or top seed remaining host the title game, or are you more comfortable with having, for the foreseeable future, a set place to have the title game?
I think for certainly the next couple of years, we're set on having it be at a neutral site. Some of the reasons for that are it allows for a proper leeway to plan. Again, thank you for the question. It gives me an opportunity to plug all of the incredible activations of our sponsors. In, I guess, 30 minutes, we're going to be hosting with CarMax a skills challenge, our first ever, where we have NWSL players competing in a shootout and crossbar challenge and a whole bunch of other things that are happening in the community. We have a fan fest that is happening tomorrow from 2 to 5, where all of our partners are activating with merch trucks and a concert on the Adobe stage at the Fan Fest, where Bishop Briggs is going to be performing. All of those things would be really hard to plan if we had 5 days, or perhaps impossible. And so for now, we think this is the right answer for the league. We remain open to the possibility that at some future date, we might decide to pivot.
You have one, Jeff? Yes or no? Okay. Last one over here in the middle.
Sorry, just to follow up on that question from Zoom about, the officials. There have been multiple games this season where Casey Stoney has been fined, Alex Morgan has been fined this year, and I was kind of curious, how do you kind of find that line between allowing the coaches to freely speak their mind about the games and stories? Because there have been stories that I've had to write this year where Casey Stoney simply said, I'm not going to say anything about that because I don't want to give the league any more of my money. So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, we're actually quite intentional about the type of language that we tolerate. And again, we go back to our values. I'll go back to my answer to Tamara's question, which is about inclusion and respect and tolerance and acceptance. And we try to do perspective taking and put ourselves in the official's shoes. Are we creating the kind of environment that makes people who are qualified want to work in our league? And if it feels personal, if it feels like a personal attack, if it creates the kind of environment that creates a disincentive for officials to want to be in our game, we're going to address it on their behalf. If it's general commentary about the state of play or the state of the league, or if there are specific concerns, certainly anyone across the league can reach out to us and give us feedback so that we can ensure that we're the best possible league that we can be.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Commissioner Berman. As she said, tell all your friends to either come or tune in to CBS tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow for the championship match. Thanks, guys.